Welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast with Greg Gaston. Thanks for being with us. We'll be talking both Tigers football and Tigers men's basketball today. Frank Bonner will join me in just a moment, Tigers football beat writer for the Daily Memphian, and then a little bit later on, Parth Upadhyaya, who covers Tigers basketball for the Daily Memphian. And what a crazy game it was last Saturday for the Tigers in Denton, Texas, as they were able to escape with a 45-42 win over the Mean Green to improve to 6-2, and it keeps everything still in the balance as far as getting to a conference championship game. But Frank, it was a wild one, and it looked like the narrative for our podcast this week would have been quite different if it had held up and North Texas was able to keep that lead after an amazing rally. But give the Tigers credit. Final minute, what a great drive by the hometown kid, Seth Hennigan, and the Tigers escape with that win.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to unpack in that game, right? On the one end, they get out of there with a win. They get the feel-good moment with the final drive of the game. But then on the other end, you're up 31-7. You shouldn't have needed a touchdown in the last minute to win the game. And so a lot of good in that game, a lot of bad. But, you know, that's how it goes. You're 6-2 no matter how it plays out.
Do you understand the fan base? It's not all the fans, but there are a lot of fans that care about how you win the game as opposed to just win or lose. Ryan Silverfield and the coaches and the players, and you've talked to them, all they care about is the bottom line, which really in sports, you think about it, it's all about winning or losing. But for the fans, it's style points, and they were not happy with a Tigers team that lost the lead. Yes, they were able to win it in the end, but they've seen too many times in the past where the Tigers have had leads, have lost leads, and weren't able to rally.
Yeah, I think our columnist John Martin in one of his pieces, he said it, pretty perfectly. He said if Memphis was playing for a spot in the college football playoff, the way they win would matter. But what they're playing for, a shot at a conference title, a shot at a New Year's Six Bowl, it just matters that they win. Now, the only reason why I'm paying attention to how they win is because I'm looking over there at SMU, and on the same day that Memphis needed a game-winning touchdown against North Texas, SMU could have put up 100 points against Tulsa if they wanted to. So that's the only reason why I'm paying attention to how they win, is because what's ahead is that game against SMU, and you're trying to figure out if they'll be ready to play that game. But as far as anything else is concerned, you score more points than the other team, you get a win in the win column, and that's really all that matters.
It's pretty amazing that this team cannot play that complete game. They'll play a great half. They played a great second half at UAB. They played a great first half, obviously a 31-7 lead against North Texas, and then it imploded in the second half. Why do you think that is?
Man, I don't know. And I mean, you ask the coaches, they're trying to figure it out too. It's not just been this year, right? You've seen that last year where it's like, one unit will play a good half, or one unit will play a good game and the other unit struggles.
Right.
Now, granted, North Texas, that offense at some point was going to kind of kick it in gear. I mean, they were the 7th or 12th fastest offense in the country. They were averaging like 34 plus points. Eventually, you felt that they were going to kind of turn the corner. But on the other end, Memphis's offense kind of slowed down in that second half. Too many big chunk plays or whatever. And so I don't know if it's fatigue, the coaching staff will mention, they've mentioned in the past in terms as far as the defense, some poor tackling was involved and things of that nature. But I don't know why they can't just do it for 4 quarters.
Right, because sometimes they play better in the second half, so you can't always look at it as fatigue.
That's what happened against UAB.
Right, right. So it's not always a fatigue factor, if it is a fatigue factor at all. And you would think this late in the year, and it wasn't like it was really hot and humid and they were cramping up and things of that nature. I mean, certainly there are a lot of factors. There's not just one area, but it has been a consistent issue all year long. Now, you could also talk about adjustments. We have talked in the past on this podcast about Memphis making really good adjustments. Perhaps it was North Texas making great adjustments at halftime and really outfoxing the Tigers coaching staff in that second half until that final drive.
Yeah, and I also think that maybe this is just what Memphis is. I don't necessarily mean that like in a bad way, but like if you look at this year, the last 2 years, even Ryan's first year, they have always been in close games. I mean, they're just a team that when they play a team that on paper is beneath them, they play down a little bit. And when they play a team that is on paper above them, they play up a little bit. Memphis just finds itself in close games, it seems like every year. Maybe that's just what that team,
it's part
what
of their
this
DNA,
team is, right? Yeah, they're gonna find a way to be in a dogfight in the fourth quarter.
Maybe the motto going into the season, instead of just finish games, would be finish the games at halftime, so we don't have to worry about the end of the game and it getting exciting and and nail biting and things of that nature. I'm sort of kidding, sort of tongue in cheek here, but it is part of this DNA that this team cannot put their foot down on the throats of their opponents when they have them down for whatever the reason is.
Well, that's what Cramsey talked about. He talked about today when we talked to him. He said
their OC.
Yeah. Sorry, offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey. He said that, he said kudos to us for being able to pull it out at the end. But he said there were plays where we could have put the game away early and we just didn't. He mentioned some of the drop passes and, some of the execution. He even said that, on some areas, he said his play calling should have been a little bit different, is what he stated. And so he acknowledged that there were times where you could have put that game away early, and he said that's what he's trying to get the offense to do.
Well, it's interesting. You talked about play calling. There was a lot of people complaining about that 4th and 1 call where they didn't convert, tried the pass play. I think it was a rollout by Seth Hennigan, and they didn't convert. And then, of course, they went for it on 4th and 6, where Blankensee had the ball between the numbers and couldn't hang on to it, and that goes back to the drops that Tim Cramsey talked about. But what did you think about it? You were up in the press box. I'm on the sideline about rolling the dice there. It's almost like they had no faith in the defense that they could stop North Texas, even going the complete length of the field if they had punted and backed them up.
Yeah, especially that 4th and 6 that's an interesting situation, because before the play call, I was like, I don't think they should be doing this. Like, what are
I
they
said
doing,
the same
right?
thing.
But and then you see the play call works. You get the receiver with the ball in his hands as a play caller. The play worked. If Demir catches that ball, are we still having this conversation?
No,
now,
game's over.
Before the snap, I thought it was questionable, but nobody says anything if you convert it. And from a play call standpoint, they put the players in position to convert. You just got to catch the ball.
Let's be honest. Everything seemed to work offensively, especially early in that game. And even on those drop passes, should have been a touchdown by Joe Skates. Maybe we're not talking about this. Blankensee makes that catch. We're certainly not talking about this. But even with that said, there were several drives in the second half where North Texas just stymied Memphis, and you scratched your head going, how is it different than what they did? They ran roughshod over him in the first half. So again, I go back to, was that adjustments, or was it simply bad execution by the Memphis offense mixed in with maybe some questionable play calls?
I don't know, because if you look at the running game, right? Now, granted, Memphis had a tremendous running game across the board. But that second half, North Texas put the clamps on the running game a little bit, right? And it's like, what? I mean, it's the same situations. It's the same guys on the field.
Same personnel, right?
Yeah, right. It's those situational runs in those second halves. North Texas won some of those run battles that they just were not winning at all in those first 2 quarters. And so I don't know what that is. Is, like you said, maybe the North Texas DC found some wrinkles that he was able to exploit or whatever. But whatever that is, Memphis, those players and the coaching staff, they have to figure it out, because, like I said, I keep mentioning SMU because that's the game that is probably going to decide whether you're in the conference title game or not. You can't play one half of football against that SMU team.
No.
So you need, against USF and against Charlotte, you've got 2 games to figure it out before you have to ante up.
One thing I think we all saw with our very eyes, if we hadn't seen it already this season, we certainly saw it against North Texas, albeit a porous defense. But Blake Watson is that next great running back in that long line of running backs that have come to the University of Memphis. I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, right. And I think he's on track to be the first 1,000-yard rusher since 2019. which I think is big for a program that prides itself on running back production. I mean, Ryan Silverfield being a O-line guy, that's something he can hang his hat on. And so I think it's huge. And then not only in the run game, I mean, he had 100 yards receiving. And so he's being used in any way he can be on the field, which I think is big for a Memphis team that lacked playmakers last season.
So let's talk about Ryan Silverfield. And I'm a big fan of Ryan Silverfield. I get a paycheck from the University of Memphis, but on my radio show at times I can be critical, but I think I'm very, very fair. Ryan has put his heart and soul into this program. He's been there 7 years. In reality, Frank, if they don't win that football game, was that the beginning of the end?
Man, yeah, possibly, right? I mean, I think there were, in the very least, whether it was the beginning of the end or not, there were going to be some discussions and conversations probably being had in that administration about where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you lose to North Texas, if you turn around and lose to SMU, then, you know, like, now granted, I don't think any decision would have been made mid-season. No. Right. And so if you lose to North Texas, I think.
But it puts the thought in your mind, right?
It definitely puts the thought in your mind. And if Memphis were to somehow backdoor their way into the conference title game, which I don't know if that would have been feasible or not, then maybe, you know, you're crying over spilled milk that isn't there. But yeah, I do think that the seat gets a little hotter if Joe Skates doesn't catch that winning touchdown.
On the flip side, some of the narrative about Coach Silverfield, especially on my daily radio show, to me just blew me away when there were people calling in and saying even if they went 10-2, it's still not good enough. There's a guy that called the show and said they should be a top 25 team every year. Top 25 team every year. Are fans becoming delusional? I don't understand. If this team goes 10-2, probably in the conference championship game, even if they go 9-3. Now, I can understand people saying, well, you played Missouri, Tulane, SMU, the three teams with real pulses on your schedule, and you lost all three of those games. Who did you beat? Well, 9-3 is 9-3. 10-2 is 10-2. Now, that's why I say if you lost this game to North Texas, there would be big problems. But I don't understand if this team finishes that strong, whether or not they make the conference championship. The bottom line is right now they're in the hunt. And I think that's all you can ask for is to be in the hunt, to be a player, to try to get into the championship game. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, before the season, I said this on our first podcast. In the last 2 or 3 games, they needed to be right there in the conversation of being in the mix of they're looking to be right there, right? We got 4 games left in the season or in the regular season. If Memphis wins, if they do what they're supposed to against Charlotte and USF, then those last couple of games, they'll be right there. But to your question about the 10-2, here's the thing about fans, right? One, there's a pocket of fans that are just delusional, right? And like there's a pocket of fans that are continuing to live in 2019 and act like 2019 has been the entire history. There's a reason why 2019 is such a talked about year, because it was the best year in program history. Well, you don't duplicate the best year in program history every single year. That's number one. And then number two, when fans feel like they're out on a coach, like after last year, a lot of fans, or pocket of fans, felt like they were out.
They don't come back. They don't get back in.
It's hard to get them back in. So it doesn't really matter. You know, Ryan could have went undefeated this season, and there would have been some fans still saying that he should have been out of there or whatever. Some fans are just like that.
And Frank, I hate to say this, but 2019 may be just an outlier. You're right. There are some people that think that should be a yearly deal. No, it should not the situation they're in now. Now, again, you're losing SMU to the ACC. You lost Cincinnati, UCF, Houston. There's no question that Memphis should be one of the top teams. We know in basketball they will be, right? Something really has gone wrong if they're not. Football, they absolutely should be at least top 2 or 3 teams every year, 2, 3, 4. They shouldn't be any less than that. But to think that they're going to the New Year's Six Bowl every year, and of course the playoff will expand, and that will include the group of 5, but to think that, oh yeah, Memphis is a playoff team every year, that's delusional.
Yeah, and I'll say this, like if you look at what you expect from a 5-year span, especially in this new AAC, you expect Memphis to be playing in the conference championship at least 2 out of those 5 years.
2 out of 5.
At least.
That's not too much to ask for.
You would prefer 3 out of 5, right? And I think 3 or 4 out of 5, they should be in the mix near the end of the season, right? They should be in the mix near the end of the season in every year, and they should be punching their way through at least 2 out of the 5. Some could argue even 3, which I wouldn't necessarily argue against that. And so Ryan is in year 4. He's in the mix, possibly punching his way through. And this is like the best recruiting class that he signed. Well, this year they're juniors or redshirt sophomores, right? So these are his guys. This year is the year where it's kind of supposed to come all together. And to this point, from a record standpoint, it has come all together. So you got to give a coach time.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so they escaped North Texas. I think that's an apropos word. And now at 6-2, to set up what should be a titanic game against SMU, they have to take care of business the next 2 weeks. That includes this Saturday, homecoming. It's a game against USF, a 4-4 team that has shown improvement this year. And then a trip to Charlotte the following Saturday. They're not a good team. They should win both these games. They should be in that position to be 8-2. But again, they almost lost it last week. USF, coached by Alex Golish, who comes over from the University of Tennessee, where he coached under Josh Heupel, runs that same up-tempo offense. I think they're the 3rd fastest in running plays in the country. So it's a team that's capable of scoring. The problem has been, which has been a recurring theme, Frank, as you know, their Tigers are playing teams with bad defenses, but teams that can score. And if you can score, you can come back in games. We saw that last week. So what can you tell us about USF, what to expect this Saturday?
Well, for one, I think, we talk about the fatigue. Obviously, they're the fastest offense. But on top of that, it's very difficult when they also have the ability to run the football. And they've got their running back and their quarterback both averaging over 70 yards a game on the ground. And so that's a dynamic that you have to pay attention to, right? I don't know if you put a spy on the quarterback, whatever you want to do. But if you're running plays to that magnitude at that pace and also running the ball, a defense can get gassed pretty quickly if you can't get off the field. And so I think you have to force those 3rd and longs to force them into passing and kind of take away that run option, because otherwise you're going to be rotating guys in and out because they're just going to be gassed.
Yeah, you're going to see that RPO all game long from their quarterback. And they have had games against quarterbacks that are multidimensional this season. But this guy is really good. And again, offensively, that has not been an issue for this team. They have at times looked like they were going to pull some major upsets, and unfortunately their defense was not able to keep that lead, which, again, sounds a lot like last week at North Texas as the Tigers were able to score in that final minute. So this is one of those deals where, look, Memphis didn't make mistakes as far as turnovers, but they had key drops. If you play your game, don't turn the ball over, don't give them extra possessions. Memphis at home should take care of business. The odds makers, the guys out in the deserts, they build those big castles out there. You know that, Frank. 13.5-point favorites are Memphis.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, and we haven't talked about Seth yet, but if Seth duplicates the accuracy that he had against North Texas, I think that offense will be fine. What is he, 22 for 28, at least 3 drops. So he should have been at least 25 for 28.
He threw a couple of incompletions.
Yeah, right? I mean, the accuracy, would you say that was one of, if not the most accurate game he's played as a Tiger?
It certainly was the most accurate game this year. I'd have to go back and look at his past games, but I would think it has to be one of the most accurate. And I don't think it's a coincidence that running game was established right away. You knew that you can run the ball against them. That running game behind Blake Watson was established so quickly that I think it made Seth very comfortable. Of course, he had his family there. He had his friends. He was in a comfortable setting, and he just picked apart that defense.
I mean, the best thing for a quarterback is when you look up, your running back has 3 carries, and he has 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, if that's the type of day that your running back is going to give you as a quarterback, yeah, that just makes you feel more comfortable. And like you said, he's in his hometown. He's got some of his family who were there who hadn't seen him play in person yet. I think it was a very comfortable setting for him, which is why I don't think it's a coincidence that when Memphis was down 4 with 47 seconds left, he was able to remain calm.
We have a cold week here in Memphis, but Saturday is supposed to be very nice, about 72 degrees. What kind of crowd do you expect for this game?
Man, I do think that some of the fans who might have hopped off the bandwagon after the Tulane game will be coming back, because this is the time that you wanted to be in, right? A few games left, you're in the conversation. So I think they'll homecoming. I mean, you got to think above 30,000.
I would hope so. It'd be disappointing if it wasn't above
maybe
30.
I'll give it 31 and some change.
That would be nice, because again, if they take care of business, the SMU game at 6-2, or make that 8-2, they'd be 8-2 at that point. Could be titanic. We remember the big SMU game back in 19 when they had game day here, how huge that was.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, okay, so let's say they take care of business these two games. Do you think, because against Tulane was like 36 and something, do you think they could reach 38?
Against SMU?
If they take care of business, these two games?
They can. I just don't know. Because there are those fans that, for whatever the reason is, because they lost to Tulane and Missouri, I guess they're the delusional ones who thought they should have gone undefeated and be ranked in the top 10, that they probably won't jump back on the bandwagon. But I still think it's a solid fan base of about, what would you say, I'm talking about diehards, 17? Like 17,000 diehards?
Oh, that are coming regardless.
Right. That's about 17,
right?
So you're looking at about 15 to 20 more to get that number. That's a lot to ask for. I mean, look at the games that we have been to here recently. In Birmingham.
Yeah.
In Denton. There's nobody there.
Yeah, and then, you've got Grizzlies and
right, and the Tigers are still
up.
drawing pretty well compared to these other teams, what they draw.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no comparison. That's why we look at Memphis as being one of the bell cows, if not the bell cow for this conference, because there is support. It's just not what you would like it to be. But if they win and take care of business, perhaps for that Tulane game, there will be, or not Tulane, but that SMU game, there will be 35,000. That would be nice, because we saw the crowd they had at Tulane. It's just unfortunate they weren't able to come through with a W.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. I mean, this is Memphis' season so far has been chalk, right? The games they were supposed to win, they have won. The only semi-toss-up that they won was the Boise State game, right?
Right.
The games where they weren't supposed to win or they weren't favored in, they have lost, right? And so I think Memphis fans are looking for the Tigers to win a game that they aren't favored to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a game that you aren't supposed to, right? Nobody's going to necessarily get up because you beat North Texas, UAB, Charlotte, USF.
Understood.
They want to see you beat Tulane, Missouri, SMU. And so you got to get that SMU game.
Yeah, it will have significance only if they win these next two, and it starts again on Saturday as the Tigers will host the Bulls from USF. Frank will be there covering it for the Daily Memphian. We'll talk again next week. We'll recap that game and get everybody ready for Charlotte. Thank you, Frank.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
This is always the busiest time because football and basketball, really a lot of the sports come together. And for the University of Memphis, it's a great time because you have football, as we just talked about with Frank, a team that still has goals that they want to reach and think they can reach. And that's, of course, playing in the conference championship game. And the basketball season is here. The men's basketball team will begin the regular season on Monday against Jackson State. They got one more exhibition game. That will be Thursday this week against LeMoyne-Owen. But they just played on Sunday against Lane College in their first dress rehearsal, winning 106-49, and a lot of positives coming out of that game. Here to talk about that, Daily Memphian Tigers reporter Parth Upadhyaya, who joins us now. Hey, Parth.
Hey, how's it going?
A lot of smiles from the players, the coaches, the fans,
just good
even
vibes
the journalists.
All around.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It was fun to watch that. That game we saw on Sunday was fun.
It was. And look, I always take it with a grain of salt, and it should be taken with a grain of salt because it is an exhibition game. But when you look at that team, there's a couple things that come out. The first thing I see is the length of this team.
Right.
And the combinations that he can use. That's the first thing I see. And then the second, I just see the general talent of this team. You haven't been in Memphis for years and years and years, but comparatively speaking to what you've seen so far, especially looking at a team last year that was top heavy, How talented do you think this team is?
I mean, compared to last year, I don't want to say night and day, because that team last year did win 26 games. They did win the conference tournament title, and they made the NCAA tournament. But last year, you really had two options as far as who's going to lead you in scoring on a nightly basis. That's Kendrick Davis and DeAndre Williams, obviously, and a bunch of guys who were mid-major role players that Penny brought in and kind of made it all work. But this year, you've got guys who were, the top dog, if not co-stars on their previous squads, and we're talking about teams like, Florida State and St. John's and Wichita State, which is in conference, Alabama, right? Like, so you've got guys who are coming from respectable programs that have done it at the highest level in this sport, now coming together. So talent's not a question. I think the question will be, can Penny and his staff massage egos and get guys to buy into certain roles? And will that, the good vibes and the camaraderie, will that last from now all the way to whenever the season ends in March?
The key will be when you face adversity for the first time.
Exactly.
That's when you know how good the team is as far as cohesiveness and chemistry. Penny went out and he filled every spot that was necessary. He got a lot of bench help, and we'll talk about that in just a second. One of the leaders of the team, speaking of Alabama, Javon Quinterly, was unable to go on Sunday. What is his status for this game on Thursday and then on the opener Monday? Is Quinterly's injury minor?
Yeah, I believe it's minor. From everything I've been told behind the scenes and what Penny said to us, to us media after that game on Sunday, he said it was a hyperextended knee, nothing to worry about. At the same time, though, I think his status is questionable on Thursday for that second exhibition. Man, when they opened to practice to us twice, right? They opened it one time end of September, and they opened it again during Penny's coaching clinic on the 21st. Javon didn't practice that second practice. Like, he was out. He wasn't dressed for practice. He was on the sideline. And then I was told the week after. So now we're, all the way to, mid-October was the coaching clinic, October 14th. He wasn't practicing then. And I was told the following week he also was not practicing. So to see that, and then you see him not dress for the exhibition, that kind of, not saying it raises this giant red flag, but at least makes you a little bit concerned, right?
You open up with Jackson State, and if he was unable to go, you still feel very, very comfortable with what you have. Right. But before too long, they jump right into the fire in the big trip down to the was it the Bahamas?
The Bahamas, yeah. Battle for Atlantis, yep.
And you got Michigan, and who knows who
potentially
you'll play
North Carolina
after that.
or
right.
Villanova.
And you want the full slate. You
exactly.
want Quinterly, because Quinterly, Penny has talked about him glowingly as far as his leadership. But Caleb Mills moved over on Sunday and started at point guard. Jalen Young comes in from UCF, also a very capable point guard with incredible speed, quick hands, had a bunch of steals in that game. Do you see the Tigers, again, let's just say Quinterly can't go. There's a game he can't go, whether it's the early in the season or later in the season. Do you see them sliding Caleb Mills over to start at point guard, or do you see Jalen Young being elevated into that position?
Well, first off, I want to say on Quinterly, I want to make it clear that I'm not alluding to the fact that I know something about the severity of his injury.
Yeah, hypothetical situation.
I'm just giving people context as to what I've seen, right, of him not practicing, what I've heard, him not practicing again the week after I saw him. So
you made it clear.
Just kind of putting that out there. As far as who starts at point guard, I think it was you who asked Penny about it after the game on Sunday, about Caleb Mills in that role and about Jalen Young, kind of how he saw those puzzle pieces fitting. Caleb Mills, I think we saw, not that he did a bad job of running the show. He still had 11 points and was 3 of 4 from the floor. But as far as being that true blue point guard, the conductor, I don't think that's him. If that's fair to say. I think he's more of a scorer, more of a bucket getter. And Penny did also say that we might see a different starting five entirely,
right?
On Thursday against LeMoyne-Owen. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jalen Young perhaps elevated to a starting role, at least for that game, with Caleb Mills playing off the ball and kind of seeing what you got with that combination in the backcourt if Quinterly can't play.
There were many players that stood out, none bigger than David Jones. It's a common name, but he is far from a common player.
Man, he is good. And that's been a question that, us as media, we've asked Penny all offseason, from the time that the last puzzle piece kind of came into play, which was, I think, Jaquan Walton, I believe, was the last addition to this team back in August. ever since that happened, we've been asking, who's going to be the alpha, who's going to be the option one, who's comfortable taking that role. And he's kind of said, nobody's emerged yet. Nobody's come out on top yet. But when I spoke to him in Dallas for AAC Media Day earlier this month, he said that David Jones was emerging as kind of that lead dog, with his personality and with his ability to score and facilitate and do a little bit of everything. I think we saw all of that, on display on Sunday. We knew he was a scorer, right? We knew he could, fill up the stat sheet in that regard. We knew he could rebound well for his size. He did it, in the Big East. I think averaged about 7 rebounds at 6'6". But man, his playmaking is what shocked me. The guy had 5 assists, and even when he wasn't registering assists, he was getting hockey assists, right? He was finding the guy who would then find the guy who would then get the bucket. So I think just his ability to do a little bit of everything makes him a natural for that A1 slot, if you will.
Did you see any deficiencies out there?
In his game or just
in
the team?
In the team.
I think it's hard to pick at what they did, right? Because they did win by 57 points. If you're going to look at one thing, though, I think it's rebounding. Mm-hmm. They played a Division II team that was, far less athletic, undersized, all that kind of stuff. And
they gave up, 10, 11 offensive rebounds?
They gave up. I'm looking at it right now. They gave up 13 offensive rebounds.
13.
Lane won the battle of offensive rebounds. Obviously, that's because they missed a lot more shots,
sure,
of course.
Yeah.
But, they got 35 rebounds for the game. Memphis got 49. Plus 14 is good, but plus 14 is something you want to see against maybe conference foes, right? Against a Division II team who you're supposed to be beating up on, which they did. You kind of want to see more of a gap there in terms of the numbers on the boards, in my opinion.
All right, other individual performances that stood out. Ashton Hardaway, Penny's other son, Jaden, started this game, and we know what Jaden's game's all about. He's been there several years now.
Right.
But Ashton Hardaway, with his size, so he can shoot over a lot of defenders, has a real smooth stroke, hit his first 3 threes, missed his next 2, had some inside moves as well. What did you think of his game overall?
I was impressed, and, I've been impressed with him since that last game, I think it was in the DR, when he kind of found his shooting stroke, and you could see it all come together for him there. It's weird though, right? Because at first in the DR, when they started that exhibition tour, Carl Sharenfont comes out and is killing it, right? Like he looks physically ready. He looks mentally ready to take on maybe a role player's role, for this team. They've got 3 freshmen. They've got Carl Sharenfont, Ashton Hardaway, and JJ Taylor. With the guys in front of those guys, I don't think there's room for more than 1 freshman to play. And now you look at what Ashton's been able to do with, being 6'8" and being a knockdown shooter, probably the best shooter on this team. To see that again on display, albeit against a Division II opponent, but just to see it again on Sunday was reassuring, at least for me, that this is a guy who's going to play a significant role for this team.
I know the center position has evolved over the years, but I still think it's nice to see sort of a throwback.
Old school. Yeah.
Old school Jordan Brown. I love it. Seemed like it was a quiet day. He still put up big numbers, didn't play mega minutes. He's going to be terrific, I believe. And then you saw flashes of what Malco can do healthy as a backup to Jordan Brown. That's a nice 1-2 punch at the center position.
Absolutely. Malcolm was, kind of one of the stories of the game. I don't know if you would agree with that, but
sure.
Based on the post-game conversation and how lit up Penny's face looked with this new version of Malcolm, who has impressed everybody in the program that I've spoken to. You'd heard it all off season. Like Malcolm is dialed in. He's physically in better shape. He's mentally locked in, all that stuff. And you're like, all right, like I'll believe it when I see it type of thing. And now we're seeing it, right? Like we saw our first sample size of it. And it looks good. Like to have a guy like that, if he can remain engaged to that level as a backup center, that's a luxury, especially in this AAC that, let's face it, doesn't really have a lot of talent at the center position.
I don't know if they'll ever need to go Twin Towers, but if they don't,
you wouldn't play those 2 guys together. No,
but if they don't, Parth, that's going to limit Malco's minutes because again, Jordan Brown, unless he's into foul trouble or knock on wood for the Tigers injured, Jordan Brown's a real deal. Jordan Brown is an NBA-esque center.
He is.
Malco is a really good, when healthy, college player. So again, I don't see the minutes there for Malco necessarily other than coming in to give Jordan Brown a blow.
Yeah, and I know he's been injured, obviously, but even last season, he averaged, I'm looking at it, 14.5 minutes a game. I don't think his minutes are going to go down too significantly from that, right? Like, I think he's going to play. If we see the same Malcolm Dandridge we saw on Sunday against Lane College, I think this is a guy who's going to play 11, 12 minutes a game. And I think, if he's satisfied with that, right, and if he can kind of remain engaged with that kind of smaller role, that would help Memphis tremendously off the bench.
You would think he would be, because you would think that conversation took place between
before
Penny
he even decided to come back.
Absolutely. We know how long it took before he decided to come back, so I guarantee you it was spelled out by Penny. One other guy I want you to comment on is Nick Jourdain. I think he's a very important part of this team. He may not start, but I could see him in the game in pivotal situations in the contest. I think he brings a lot to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he played about 20 minutes. He played some of the most minutes of anybody on the floor that night on Sunday, or that afternoon rather. Did a little bit of everything, right? Had 8 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. And I think that's who Nick Jourdain is. He's not a guy who's going to score 20 a game. He's not a guy who's going to have 15 rebounds a game per se, but he is a guy who's going to contribute in a variety of ways and do all the little things right, if that makes sense.
Fills up the stat sheet, right?
Absolutely. And you saw him kind of be engaged defensively too. Like maybe the blocks don't show it. Maybe he didn't kind of register numbers, right, so to speak, but he was active defensively. He'd rotate and help out and do really well in that regard as well.
Okay, so the couple of questions that have been ongoing for a long time now include questions about a couple of guys named Williams.
Sure.
One, of course, being DeAndre Williams. The DeAndre Williams situation is interesting. Here we are, as we tape this on Halloween afternoon, that there's still a chance that DeAndre Williams can join this team. And in fact, Penny Hardaway is still somewhat optimistic. Are you as optimistic? And what do you know from all your work that you've done behind the scenes trying to get information about this?
Well, I'll start by saying I know as of yesterday there was no update, right? There has not been a definitive answer, yes or no, or either in either direction rather. It's funny though, 3 weeks ago, people, I don't want to say they had moved on, but they had kind of lost that hope, right? Like there was no optimism. They were already calculating what this team would be without him, and that might very well be the case. He may not be a part of this fold, but in recent weeks, I know people have gained optimism for whatever reason, whether it be correspondence with NCAA or whatever in that regard. I think it's a wait and see approach, but I do think there's a chance still. Yes.
Well, again, with Penny saying that he's still somewhat optimistic, what are we to say, or who are we to say that, it's absolutely 100% not going to happen, Penny? Well, Penny's getting information that we are not privy to. So, again, I still think it would be a surprise if it happened. If it does, let's just say it happens.
Sure.
Is this going to affect the chemistry of this team?
Absolutely. But I think in
a bad way, though.
Yeah, there's gonna be some bumps in the road, I think, right? Like these guys have been together. I know they came in periodically, but the last of these guys arrived on campus in August, right? So now you're looking at they've all been together for at least 2.5, 3 months. DeAndre has not spent a minute with this group. Right. He's been in Florida, working out with his trainer.
So is it worth it?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get at, right? There's going to be bumps in the road, but 10 times out of 10, you take a guy like DeAndre Williams who has All-American potential on your squad, even if it means rubbing some people the wrong way or having to go through that kind of growing pain of putting this guy into the fold.
Who is affected the most by that, if it happens?
Man, you'd got to think Jaquan Walton, right? Like he'd be, in terms of starting five, the odd man out. You've got Javon Quinterly who's going to run your show. We've already Sharpied in Jordan Brown at center. He's your best true center. David Jones, I think, is going to be the best player on this team, the most dynamic player on this team. So that's 3 guys in the starting lineup, right? Now you're adding to the backcourt Caleb Mills, who you brought in to kind of play that 2-guard role. The only person that, is on the outside looking into that starting 5 is Jaquan Walton. You're going to have to kind of convince him, hey, man, like you can be 6th man of the year. You can still be a big part of this team, play starters minutes, but, you're not going to be able to start.
So you'd have Walton, you'd have Jourdain coming off the bench. You'd have Young. I mean, you talk about
Malcolm,
a deep team.
Malcolm Hardaway.
Right. Malcolm's minutes could be affected as well.
Right.
So DJ, in that scenario, DJ would be your small forward.
I think so. Okay. I think he can play a variety of positions. Like his rebounding allows him to play the 4. He can handle the ball, so he can play the 2 and the 3 as well. And I think on both ends of the floor, offense and defense, he can do a variety of things.
Final thing for you, of course,
Sure.
the ongoing saga that is the other Williams, Mikey Williams, which, again, I think you and I both look at each other going, this isn't going to happen. But could you imagine? I can't even
That would tank chemistry.
Both Williams
Right.
and all these other guys on the
my
same
gosh.
team. But there was obviously some more movement as far as his case is concerned.
Yeah, so obviously he was supposed to have his arraignment, I believe it was last Wednesday, did not show up in person. They added those 3 charges that we kind of knew they were going to add after the preliminary hearing, which was, the one charge for the threats that he made, the verbal threats that witnesses testified that he made, including you're going to leave here with bullet holes, which is absolutely insane.
Right.
And then they found out that there was an additional person in the car. So there was charges added on that account as well.
9 felony charges now. Right?
9 felony charges. Yeah, he already had the 6, and they've added 3 more. Then on Friday, he had his arraignment where he actually did show up, was ordered to show up by the judge. And you've got somebody from his camp, his uncle, Pat McCain, for the first time speaking on record saying, hey, we've got, and I'm paraphrasing here, hey, we've got the full support. We've got full support from the University of Memphis. We're very confident we're going to be playing basketball this season. We can't wait, and just kind of speaking optimistically about where he thinks Mikey will end up when this is all said and done. It's hard to believe, right? Like when you're looking from the outside in.
I think it's absolutely impossible, but in sports in this day and age, especially since COVID, you never know. I mean, guys have played 4 or 5 years of ball and they're listed as juniors or sophomores. So I don't understand, but this is the legal system. It seems like it's going to be a hard thing to beat for Mikey Williams. But again, we'll keep you posted. Obviously, Parth will keep you updated on everything that's happening with Memphis basketball. And of course, when we talk next week, Parth, we'll actually have our first game done in the books. We'll be talking about what counts, and that's game 1 against Jackson State. Thank you so much.
I'm excited for it. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great stuff. Really appreciate it. All right, folks, be sure to check out our other podcast, the Daily Memphians Food Podcast. That's called Sound Bites. It's hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is about arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies Podcast, also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Until next time, I'm Greg Gaston. Take care, everybody.